Okay, so now we're going to be doing part 2 of goat stew. So if you remember, we marinated these goat pieces in a whole bunch of different foraged herbs and spices, and also store-bought herbs and spices, and it's been sitting in the fridge for a couple days, so now it's ready to be browned off. And we're going to be doing a mushroom and goat stew. And I think I may throw in some apples too, I'm just not sure yet. So the first thing that we need to do is turn on our stew pot. We'll be using this nice big Dutch oven here, and we will wait for this to heat up and then put in some oil, and we're going to brown off our goat, and then we're going to do the same thing for our mushrooms. So we have 3 different kinds of mushrooms that we're going to be using today. We have the resinous polypore, some honey mushrooms, and also some maitake. This is a recipe I developed last year. I used beef instead of goat, but I don't have any stewed beef in the house right now, and I do have some stewed goat, and I picked all these mushrooms yesterday. So, you know, that's the fun of foraging. You get to experiment with your own recipes because you never know when you're going to get such a nice bounty that will need to be cooked. Oh, excuse me. So that pot is heating up. Just some regular olive oil we're going to be using. Yeah. Be generous. I'm going to bring you guys over here so that you can see. And as soon as this is ready, we are going to put in our goat, excuse me, and we're going to brown it. And then we're going to do the same thing with the mushrooms. All right. We're placing the goat chunks in the oil so that each one has a little bit of space and they're not too crowded, because we want to be able to move them around. Okay, so that's about all we can fit in there for right this minute. And while that's working, I am going to start prepping the mushrooms. So you want to take the dirt off the bottom. You can save this piece and make stock out of it, or mushroom tincture. Because this is a stew and these mushrooms are going to cook for quite a long time, I'm going to leave them in rather large pieces because I like to see these. I think it's kind of fun to be able to pull them apart yourself. So yeah, this may look a little large, but remember it's going to be cooked for a couple of days before it's actually ready. And then these little gibbly bits you want to keep as well, and I'll save them in a bowl. And I'll put them in either for stock in with the discard piece, or we'll put them in with the mushrooms a little bit later. So we want to just remove some of the dirt off the bottom, save the stump, and then leave that pretty much the size that it is. That's a good size. This here, we want to kind of cut off some of the bottom, save the stump, and then it's kind of broken itself up into these nice pieces already. Let's go check the goat and see how it's doing. Yep. I'm going to give that a quick turn. Starting to get some nice color there. Okay, so that's going to keep cooking, and we're going to go back to prepping our mushrooms. So I got one more piece of maitake here that needs to be cleaned. Remember, we're saving our stumps. A lot of work foraging for these mushrooms, and you don't want to waste any bit of them at all. You know, you've got to carry them sometimes a couple of miles. Keep them from getting squashed, and there's no reason to waste any of our hard work. This piece in particular would be really good roasted because it's got such a nice flat side. So I think I'm actually going to keep these and have them later for dinner and just roast them in the oven with a little bit of olive oil. So the maitake steak like this is really, really very good. These end pieces are fine. There's a little bit of leaf and tree bark in there. We don't really want that in our stew. These honeys I'm going to leave basically whole the way that they are. And after I go check the goat, we're going to cut up the resinous polypore into slightly smaller pieces. These are a little tough and they need quite a lot of cooking. So we don't want them to be quite as big as the maitake because that will break down quite a lot, whereas the resinous polypore won't very much. These are nice and young, so they're still pretty easy to cut. Almost like butter here, my knife is going through them. But any that are a little tough, you either want to reserve to make tincture out of, or cut nice and small so that when you're eating it, it doesn't feel like you're chewing on a piece of wood that's undercooked. Because that is what these will taste like if they're undercooked. They do taste a little woody. But the texture is really, really very nice, I think. So I'm just chopping them up into almost like stew beef kind of sizes. And then you just kind of break them apart like that. This one is a little big, so I'm going to cut it again. Yeah, that's probably all right. Okay. Alright, so we're going to check our goat again. Oh yeah, look at that. Oops. Sorry. Look at that. Isn't that color beautiful? Goat is something I really enjoy, and I've been able to get a nice price on it lately. This leg that I bought was only $10 a pound, which I really don't think is bad at all, considering the price of meat these days. I'll throw in another piece so we can keep this going. I'm going to chop up a few more mushrooms while that goat is still cooking. And so yesterday, I put these in the refrigerator because I wasn't going to have time to cook them overnight. This piece is a little rough. I'm going to put it aside, and we're going to make a tincture out of that one. But they've actually held up really well in the refrigerator. I know they look a little worse for wear, but this mushroom bruises very easily because it's so wet. I know I said it was tough, but it starts off almost gelatinous, and then as it ages, it becomes woody. So, and it ages from the middle outwards. So the edges may still be growing while the inside over here is becoming rather woody, which is exactly what's happened to this piece. So I'm going to cut the edge off here, and you can see I'm having to saw a little bit more as I get closer to the edge here. So this middle piece I think is too tough, and we're going to save that for tincture as well. And that's okay, you know. The tincture of this mushroom is also going to be really good for you. I'm not entirely sure what specific part of the body the resinous polypore works with, but all of these mushrooms that grow on trees are feeding on the immune system of the tree because these mushrooms are parasites. And the tree is trying to get rid of them because they're killing the tree. But just as a cow absorbs nutrients from grass and then concentrates it and makes them available for us as people to eat, the mushroom does the same thing with the immune system of the tree. And that is why these wild mushrooms are so good for you, is because they are just chock full of beta-glucans and polysaccharides and other really good compounds for your health. Keeps the tree living several hundred years. Just imagine what it can do for you. So we're going to go back and check our goat because I'm starting to smell that it's getting hot. Oil spitting a little bit. That it's getting right where we want it to be, nice and brown. Let's scrape the bottom of the can just a little bit. And all of this is just really great flavor that we're getting from browning our meat like this. Throw in a couple more pieces. You know, a lot of people don't like goat because it has a lot of bones in it, but the bones have a lot of really good flavor. And by cooking them down like this for such a long period of time, we're really giving the flavor a chance to come out and mingle with the other flavors that we're trying to incorporate. Got a little bit of goat left, and then we're going to put in the mushrooms. And then some onions. And then we'll deglaze the bottom of the pot. And then we will add in our stock, and this is going to cook on low for at least 24 hours, but maybe 48. It'll help tenderize the meat and the mushrooms and get all these flavors accustomed to living with one another in this pot. Because we've got a lot of different flavors from different continents all competing together in here, and we want to give them time to adjust. You don't want to discard whatever marinade is left in your bag because you're going to rinse that out and then pour it in when you put in the stock. We're going to let these go for a few minutes and return to chopping our mushrooms. There we go. Was really hoping for a good harvest of resinous polypore this year. It's one of my new favorites because I just love the texture and I love the way it tastes in a stew like this. I think it's really very good. And so I'm really excited that I get to share this with you guys. So now that when you see it, you want to pick it, you'll know what you can do with it. So I picked that yesterday specifically for tincture, because it was really woody. That's also kind of woody. But this is a nice mushroom because you can get quite a lot of it all at once. Most of this that you see in front of you here was just from one flush on one tree. I found this 3 different times yesterday, but only one of the spots was really, really good. And that's where these nice big pieces came from, was that last spot that I found this resinous polypore at. So these pieces are pretty tender, which is why I'm kind of leaving them as one larger piece. I'm a little curious to see how that compares to some of the other small ones. You know, you may only find this mushroom once or twice in a season, so you have to remember year over year what you'd like to change about your recipe. Either that or you have to write it down. I am so bad at writing my recipes down though, which is another reason I'm glad I've been doing this way for you guys, because this way I have more of a record, and when I share them on places like Instagram or TikTok, a lot of time I will write the recipe down, or at least most of the recipe down, so there's a record of it there as opposed to just my memory, which is what it was before I started creating these videos. It was just me, what I remember from year over year, trying to make improvements. So we're actually going to deglaze this pot a little earlier than I thought we were, because we're building quite a nice pond here on the bottom. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to start taking these pieces of goat out, and I've got my ladle for my stock. This other pot I've got right here on the stove is an everlasting stew that I've had for 3 months now. But the components have been there a lot longer than 3 months. It's kind of like a sourdough starter. It's a little like a food pet. You know, you have to heat it up every day to keep the mold from growing on it. But it provides me with a nice, readily available amount of stock, an extra flavor, and also recycling for any food scraps that don't necessarily get eaten from dinner. They're already cooked, and they've already got their own set of nice flavors on them, but my eyes were just bigger than my stomach, and I didn't make it. Didn't finish. All right, so we're gonna deglaze that pot real quick. Liquid. Okay, I guess maybe a little bit more. This didn't quite come off as I thought it was going to. This actually is a piece of resinous polypore from last year's stew. This forever stew was created from a whole bunch of little bits of leftover stew that I had in my freezer, and I needed to empty the freezer out a few weeks ago, and so I decided that instead of just heating them all up individually and saving them that way, I would put them in one big pot and make stock, and so that's what I did. I have a stock stew now for flavors for whenever I need it. So now we're going to put our mushrooms in with a little bit of oil and give them a salt. These mushrooms were in season, so we're going to give them a little bit of salt and some pepper. If you season as you go along, you don't have to do so much seasoning right at the end. These mushrooms, as I've said, are quite wet and will release quite a bit of moisture. And one thing I'm going to do to kind of help them out a little bit is put the pot lid on, and so they'll heat up and the moisture will release a little bit faster. While that's happening, I am going to chop some onions. Onions and goat and mushroom go really well together, I think. So we're going to save our scraps again, the onion tops and tails and the peel, because that can be used to make stock. No need to throw away perfectly good food. I don't have a compost bin, but you can also throw this in there. That is a little less work than making stock, but you just want to throw these scraps in a bag in the freezer. And then when the bag gets full, we have some stock. I'm going to do bigger pieces because, again, this stew is going to be cooking for quite a while. And I like little pieces of onion. If you don't, you can cut them smaller and then they'll disappear for you. Been toying with the idea of not showing every little bit that goes into the stew, other than the just waiting time. But I think it's important to show you guys this because either you can fast forward through it yourselves, if it gets a little boring. But it'll also give you an idea of how long it took me to complete this recipe, and it'll give you an idea of how long it may take you to complete this if you decide you want to do it at home, because all of the time will be here and you can see it. Alright, so I just gave those mushrooms a quick turn, and we're going to wait another few minutes for them to finish before we move on to our next step. Okay, so you can see these mushrooms have released quite a lot of their liquid, as there is now a puddle on the bottom of the pan that was not there when we started cooking. So they need another few minutes to cook off. We don't want to see any dry areas like the one on the inside of this sheath right here. I don't know if you can... Yeah, there's a little bit of dry space still in there, so these need just a few more minutes to cook before we can take them out and put in the next batch of mushrooms. So these are just about done, and so we're going to take them out and put them in with the goat, and then the next batch of mushrooms goes in, which will be our maitake, and then we'll put the honey mushrooms and the onions in at the end, saute those. And then we're going to return everything to the pot, cover it with liquid, bring it to a boil, and then reduce the heat to low so that it has plenty of time to cook. a little bit of salt and some pepper. And these will take a good few minutes to cook off. So we'll be right back when they're done. So our maitake has cooked down quite a bit. It's not all the way where it needs to be, but it's enough that we got to give it a quick move. And you can see that it's starting to show its cooked appearance. It's looking a little less solid and a little bit more floppy, but it's still not quite done enough to take out the cooking. Perfect. So these are just about ready to come out. And they smell really good. A little nutty, a little herby, very woodsy. Just an absolutely wonderful, wonderful mushroom. This pot is getting kind of full. It's going to be a very big, hearty stew. But that's the way we like it. Whatever doesn't get eaten now will be preserved for the winter time when you'll want a nice hearty meal. Keep you warm. And just like before, we're going to deglaze our pan a little bit. So we don't lose any of this flavor when we do our last round, which is the onions and the honey mushrooms. We don't want it to burn. Which is why we're doing this after each step. Nice honeys are going to go in. Throw in another splash of oil. Salt, pepper, and saute. So once these have cooked down, we're going to add in everything from this bowl and the liquid. And then we'll be more or less done. wonderful. Alright, so this is about where I want it to be, and we are going to throw in some beach plum. It's not quite vinegar yet, but it's on its way to being vinegar. Today, while this has been going, I've been straining the fruit mash out of what will be a whole bunch of vinegar that I made this year. It starts off as kind of a wine, but eventually, because I don't have any airlocks, the air gets in, and then it becomes vinegar. And so I had a whole bunch of beach plum seeds and skins that still had some flesh on them, and I didn't want them to go to waste, so I decided to ferment them. So I'll have a whole bunch of really nice plum vinegar when they're done. And they're nearly done now, so that's what I'm going to be doing on the other side while this is still cooking. So there we've got our plum vinegar, plum wine, plum almost vinegar that is deglazing the bottom of this pot. And I am going to start putting the stuff that we took out back in. Covering it all over with liquid from our Forever Stew, and also some more plum vinegar. So as you can see, we've got a nice full pot here, very full pot of mushrooms and goat, which we are going to be stewing for many hours until they're all beautifully tender and soft and ready to eat. We need just a little bit of liquid. They said save that marinade bag. I just put in some water and sloshed it around so that we could get the rest of the good stuff from the bottom of the bag out of it. And now we're going to throw in this vinegar that we've sloshed around in the bowl. We don't want to leave any flavor behind. So in that goes. Let's give this a lift. The pot's a little too full for a proper stir, so really we're just kind of picking up what's on the bottom and moving some of it to the top. And so this smells absolutely wonderful, and I will let you guys know what it tastes like when it's ready to be eaten. So now we're just going to bring it to a boil and then leave it on low, at least until I go to sleep in several more hours. But possibly. Happy foraging, happy eating, and enjoy the recipe.